Hello, welcome back to the Yarn and Yarns YouTube channel. My name is Angela and all the places you can find me should be linked in that description box just below the video. I am going to be doing a kind of planning my project video today. I had a inkling of an idea and it's going to be one of those where I thought, yeah, that'd be great to record. Let's put the camera on and do it. So this may never see the light of day. I have no idea. It could be a bit chaotic. I have no idea where it's going to go. But I just needed to talk to someone about my project planning, or lack of, and I thought, why not do that with you? I know I'm really here just sat chatting to my phone, but it feels like I'm talking to you. Feels like I'm working through this with someone else, so thank you for listening. So back at the start of the month, if you watched my May making plans video, you'll know that I very enthusiastically announced that I would like to work exclusively with my handspun yarn throughout the month of May, and it's been going really well so far. I have made great progress on my weekender, which was the sweater that I'm knitting entirely from handspun, and I've also cast on and cast off a pair of handspun socks. The yarn was a slightly thicker weight, so more like a DK than the traditional sort of 4-ply that you might use for a sock, so they jumped on and off the needles really quickly. And actually it was a good job they did, because if you follow me on Instagram, you might have seen a post that James, who does the laundry in our house, accidentally felted my Cheviot, my first ever pair of handspun socks. It was lucky that I had another pair in a similar weight on the needles already. Although, was it lucky, or had I cursed myself again? A bit like my mending. Once I start doing something, am I cursing the rest of my knitting? I hope that's not the case. Anyway, I'm waffling now. So those socks jumped on and off the needles, which means that my only project at the moment is the weekender, and we're 12 days into the month and I'm really itching to start something else. But I don't know what to start. I hadn't got further than planning socks and a little bit of weaving, and I'm not in the right frame of mind today to warp up my loom, which needs to be done before I can get on with the weaving. So I thought I'd sit here in my little corner. So I'm sat here today, which is the opposite side of the craft room to the orange wall that I usually sit in front of. And I've got some of my books and magazines that I've collected over the years behind me, and I've been thinking quite a bit recently about how I often neglect these publications in favour of hopping online and searching for a pattern that meets my requirement. So I thought it might be fun to do a little bit of a hop through some of the publications that I already have, with a view to thinking about whether any of the patterns there might be suitable for some handspun. I've also recently been cataloguing my handspun yarn, and I'm not sure if I can swing you around gently. Sorry about that jog. But this bucket here is full of my handspun yarn, which is quite a big tote. It's a 45 litre tote. So I've got quite a lot of handspun in here. But they're all, for the most part, smaller quantities. I've got a couple of sort of big boys on top, but for the most part they're kind of like 100-gram braids or smaller samples even. I've got quite a few mini skeins like this in here. I've got some really fun and funky sort of art yarns that I've spun. Yeah, there's all sorts in there, but with the exception of 1 or 2 skeins in there, none of them were spun with a particular purpose or a project in mind. Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit stuck. I'm not really sure where to go from here. As I say, there's a couple of skeins in here which I do know what I want to do with, but the majority I don't have an idea for, and I'm hoping that by sitting and flicking through some of the pattern magazines and books that I have, I might get some inspiration. I spent some time at the weekend, as I say, cataloguing this handspun, so going through and measuring an approximate length and trying to remember. It's been quite a few months since I sort of like purposefully labelled or record kept any of this handspun, which is really naughty, and it's something that I must get better at. If I want to see an improvement in my spinning, if I want to start spinning a little bit more intentionally, I need to remember where I've come from, and I can't do that unless I'm recording what I'm doing. As I've been going through the yarns, I've spotted a few things that I was thinking, oh, they might work nicely together, but again, I have no idea what sort of projects to put them in. So this is the leftovers from those poor Cheviot socks that recently got felted, but I also have this little sample of what I believe is just a merino that I spun from a sample bag that I picked up at Wonderwall. But I think they go quite nicely together, that pale green with the greens and purples in the Cheviot. I've got what is potentially quite a fun, oops, it's coming undone, self-striping yarn that I spun from some Rolags. So that might be a fun one to work with. And also I've got a couple of bags in here somewhere. Oh, this is getting to be a bit of a mess. Where I bought a set of braids or mini braids or mini bats that kind of came together, that the colours work really nicely together. So I've got this really fun one, which is the Monster Mash, I believe. Yeah, Monster Mash Blueface Leicester trilogy, which I got from Curio Yarns. Similarly, I've got a colour combination in this bag, again of Blueface Leicester, which was from a Nellie and Eve Fibre Club. Those colours look nice together. So yeah, I've got all sorts of possibilities, but no concrete ideas what to do with them. So yeah, I'm hoping that a bit of time spent in this corner going through some of these books might help. So I've been down that rabbit hole for a lot longer than the half an hour that I said I would spend doing this. It's probably been more like an hour and a half, if I'm being honest with myself. But that's okay, because I have got tons of good ideas, a couple of definite maybes, some possibilities, and as I say, great ideas for the future. It was time well spent, I think. One thing that did strike me as I don't know if you'd call it interesting, but just something to think about, is that the approach that I'm taking in this planning session, if you can call it that, it's very loose, is I am flicking through my pattern books and trying to match up yarn possibilities with patterns. My next step for the projects that I decide to take forward will obviously be to do a bit of swatching and see if the pattern and yarn combos that I have in my head work out. I have my fleece spin that I'm also going to be thinking about later on in this month, and it struck me as interesting that I'm approaching that in a slightly different way, in that for that particular quantity of yarn, it's a much bigger quantity of yarn. My plan is to measure out my yarn to see how much I've got, knit a swatch, and then try to match the project to the swatch. So yeah, a slightly different approach to hopefully get to the same goal, which is a project suitable for my handspun yarn. But yeah, just kind of struck me as an interesting thought that there are many different ways for us to approach working with our yarns and patterns, and yeah, anyway. I don't know if that was interesting. It's interesting to me. So I thought I'd start just by highlighting a few patterns that I've got in some of my pattern books and magazines that I thought might be suitable for handspun yarn, but that I don't quite have the yarn for, or at least I don't think. So the first one is from Pom Pom Quarterly. This is quite an old issue, Winter 2016, issue 19. So these patterns are bound to be available as single downloads by now. And it's the first pattern that popped out from this issue is this, which is the alloy hat. It uses 3 different colours of yarn, and I think some brioche by the looks of it, to make this really simple but really effective hat. And I've got a couple of batches of yarn that are 3 colours, but one of them I think I'm going to use in a different project, and I've got a couple of other hat pattern possibilities as well. But I was thinking like the alloy might be good for one of these sort of quantities of yarn that I've got. I really like how those two look together. Not a colour combination I would think of often, that raspberry red and that sort of logwood purple, but yeah, it might be something that I could spin up an extra colour, like a nice dark grey or chocolatey brown would probably look really nice as the third colour in a combination for that alloy hat, for instance. The next one is in a slightly more recent issue of Pom Pom. This is autumn 2020. But in here is a cowl pattern. Is the cowl, but immediately these bits are made up with different colours of yarn. But immediately I thought of a sort of fractal spin or a self-striping spin, so you could just use one skein of yarn to get that sort of gradiated effect with handspun. So that struck me as very handspun-esque. What else have I got? Oh, in Interpretations, volume 4, is the Colour Spell shawl by Joji Locatelli. This is a 4-ply shawl, but of course it's a shawl, so you can match your needle size and just grow it as big as you want it to be. It's this lovely crescent-shaped shawl using lots of different colours. I think that one would be quite nice for little bits and pieces of handspun. And then the last one is from the Forest issue of Making, and this was the issue that my lovely Moose was in. But there's a fabulous hat pattern that I'm really tempted by. However, the yarn that I would use for this hat I've earmarked for one of my definite possibilities, but it could be that if my other idea for the yarn doesn't work out when I do the swatch, that I might come back and revisit this idea. So this is the Rivers hat by Alice Catano, and in the book there's two different versions of this. So that is version 1, so it's a 2-colour hat, and I think it's a slip stitch pattern. Let me try and find the other colour version. There's a blue version. Not sure how easily I'm going to be able to show you that. I'm trying to angle it so I'm not giving away the pattern secret sauce. But yeah, I really like the colour play in that hat. And again, I think particularly in this version, this kind of mustardy brown colour kind of reminded me of some of the handspun that I've got in my stash. And actually my immediate thought was this trio of yarns that I've got, that I spun up from Curio Stitches. Those colours I think might play nicely together in a version of that hat. But I've actually got another idea for this project. They were a few ideas of patterns that made me think of handspun. I've got the next sort of little section of things to show you are some possible ideas for the future. So not something that I am super drawn to now, or in the case of one of the projects I don't quite have the right yarn yet, but these are sort of patterns that might inspire projects for the future. So the first one is from this book, which is Cozy Alpaca Knits by Jem Weston. This was a publication for Rowan, and I really enjoyed this pattern here called the Tassel Pillow. And again, I think you could use lots of bits of handspun to create this sort of striping effect. There's a slightly different version with a bit of colour work in it, but I really like the contrast of the textures on this pattern, the different directions of the stitching, and I have a couple of yarns in my stash that I've already spun up that I thought might work quite nicely as a pillow. So I've got this one, which again is another Curio Stitches. This is a fibre blend with some flax in, and I thought that might make quite a nice sort of I think I spun it fractally, so it's going to slightly stripe. It wouldn't be a definite stripe like that, but I thought that might make a sort of fun stripe section for that pillow with this green, which was a quantity of fibre that was gifted to me by Caroline of Colourful Creativity. That might make a nice sort of contrasting colour for sort of the garter ridge side of that pillow. Kind of, yeah, so I thought that might be a possibility for the future. In the Shetland Wool Week Annual from 2017, there is a pattern called the Sea Thrift Mitts, and there's two versions of those. There's a multicolour version on this side, and there is just a one-colour version on this side. And I have this really small quantity of fibre that I carded up last summer that I think might actually look quite nice for the one colour version of those mitts. It's this fibre here, which I blended some unknown natural fibre with some bits of sari silk to give a slightly tweedy effect. And I'm wondering, there's quite a small quantity here, but I'm wondering if there would be enough to make some sort of version of those mitts. Even if it's not exact, maybe I could adapt the pattern slightly to the yarn that I've got. That's a idea that's rumbling around in my head for that yarn that I have in my stash. Pom Pom again, spring 2018. There's a pattern in here called the Carimbo mitts, again another pair of fingerless mitts by Kelly Orderman. I have to show you the pattern, the page on the pattern page without spoiling. There we go. So I think back at the beginning of the video I was talking about this combination of yarn, which is leftover Cheviot and this sort of merino sample, and I'm thinking the leftover Cheviot could be the brown equivalent, and then I need one other colour. I'm not sure, the green could maybe be the sort of mustard equivalent, and then if I can get a light neutral as a background, that might be a possibility for the future, but I might need to do a little bit more spinning for that one. And then finally, James bought me this a couple of Christmases ago. It came with one of the hat kits, and in here I was just flicking through. A lot of the yarns that I have in my Handspun stash are more like DK weight. The Milwaukee tweed is a 4-ply, but there is this simple striped hat in here, which I just felt really inspired by. I love the dark brim followed by the stripes, and I have this skein of what is essentially self-striping. There's probably a few sections in here which are slightly marled, where I've chain plied it and not sort of matched the colours up properly, but that could definitely serve as a stripy hat, and I like the idea of pairing it with a darker colour for a brim. I've got this colour in my Handspun stash, but it's part of this lovely sort of autumnal set, again fibre that was gifted to me by Caroline, and I'm planning to do something with these yarns together. Originally I was going to do some sort of striped mitt or hand warmer, but they might be quite nice for some sort of colour work project as well. But there's this lovely sort of deep sort of chocolatey brown grey. It's a difficult colour to describe, but I thought that might make a nice dark brim to be the base for this fun stripy hat, inspired by the hat in Milwaukee tweed. And I do have some more. Caroline very kindly sent me some more of this fibre in case I needed it for the project that I was planning to make with these yarns. So yeah, I think I might spin that up. It's actually on my spinning cart as part of my spinning plans, so I may spin that up with the intention of pairing it with this striped yarn to make a fun hat. So yeah, plenty of ideas and possibilities, but let's get to the nitty-gritty. Why we're really here is for me to actually cast some things on. So I have got 2 definite maybes, and it's all going to come down to swatching. And both of these projects are from back issues of Pom Pom. This one is from issue 31. There's a pattern in here called Alatau, I think. It's a hat pattern, originally knit in the Harrisville Nightshades yarn. So it's kind of a nice textured hat. And if you've ever seen the Nightshades yarn, I do have some of it in stash, but it's buried somewhere. It's a very dark yarn, but it has a sort of colour overtone. So when you look at it from a distance, it looks almost black or really dark charcoal grey, but it's dyed in such a way that the colours, you actually have a base colour of like purple or green or red. It's a very, very beautiful yarn. I don't have anything quite like that in my stash, but I do have this skein of yarn, which reads, it's showing slightly different on camera as they often do, but it reads quite sort of browny purple from a distance. You can kind of get the gist, and then when I bring it closer, it's got sort of tones of oranges, like rusty orange and blue in there, which, although not exactly the same as Nightshades, kind of gives me that sort of vibe. So I don't know though if it's going to be a little bit too variegated for the texture to show up properly, but I'm going to give it a go. I think I really like that idea. So I'm going to swatch for that and see if the yarn and pattern will play together nicely. And then the second project that I'm going to play around with is going to utilise these colours from Curio Stitches, hopefully. This is the one I'm a bit more on the fence about. I'm not sure. I mean, both of them I'm kind of on the fence about because it will come down to my swatching. But I'm not sure exactly how this one will play out. But in the Moon issue of Pom Pom, there is a pattern called Sina or Sina, S-I-N-A, and it's for a pair of mitts using, I think it uses some Garther Nor yarn, Triskelion. So this uses like a Triskelion yarn held double to create this marling effect. And then on the palm of the hands, you go down to one colour to create this kind of full moon in the palm of your hands, which I really like. And then obviously one of your colours is held to make the contrast for the cuff. So I'm wondering if I could use a combination of these to create the mitts. Now I'll have to do a bit of planning because I'm not sure how this is going to work, whether it will work at all, and how this will knit up. But my thinking is, and again this is where my swatching is going to come into it, is maybe to do the cuffs in this dark colour and then to hold these two together for the main part of the mitt, and then have the moon in that really bright luminous green. Now this idea I think is a little bit more out there in terms of my colour choice, and also I think I chain plied this yarn, so it's slightly thicker, so I'm definitely going to have to do a good bit of swatching to see whether this will actually work, whether I like the colour combination, but I am definitely intrigued to give it a try. The other thing that I'm mindful of is, as I'm recording this, my video announcing that I'm working with Handspun this month has not yet gone up on YouTube, and I'm hoping, I've asked in that video for pattern suggestions, so I don't want to cast on too many things in case I have some fabulous pattern suggestions in that video. But I'm definitely excited to swatch for those two possibilities, the hat and the mitts, and go from there. So I guess it's a case of watch this space. I'm also really excited about the possibility of this fun self-striping hat. So I think I am going to raid my spinning cart and see if I can find that fibre from Caroline and spin up the other quantity I have in that dark yarn. I'm not sure if this video's worked or if it's of any interest at all. I've enjoyed myself. I've got some ideas, I'm feeling inspired, and I guess that was the main point of me starting this video, was to be able to talk these things through with you. Once again, thank you for listening. Possibly by the time this video goes up on YouTube, my month of spinning with Handspun might be coming towards its end. However, I'm always happy to work with Handspun projects. So if you have any thoughts, ideas and suggestions on yarns projects that I have shared with you today, then please do leave them in the comments below. I'm definitely going to sign off and see if I can do something with this hot mess of a video in editing to make it somewhat watchable. So if you have stuck with me throughout the whole video, thank you so much for listening. I'd love to hear your suggestions in the comments below. I'll be back again soon with some more making content and possibly some more waffly hot mess videos like this. But whatever comes next, hope you will join me, and until we get to spend time together again, I hope you get to do some of the things that you enjoy. Great big woolly hugs to you all. Bye for now.